Mom, I'm at Lisa's birthday dinner. We'll talk tomorrow, okay? These words pierced through my chest as I held the phone so tightly my fingers turned white. My knees gave out right there in the cold hospital corridor, while the doctor still waited a few feet away, clipboard in hand, and the look of someone who had delivered news like this hundreds of times. James had just passed away. 47 years together, ended by a massive heart attack on a Wednesday afternoon. And my only son, my Michael, couldn't interrupt the birthday dinner. Before I continue, tell me in the comments which city you're reading this story from, and if you've ever lost someone you loved deeply. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel, so you don't miss stories like this one. I returned to our house, now just mine, that same night. The taxi dropped me off on the cobblestone sidewalk of Magnolia Heights in Boston, where we'd lived since we got married. Each step to the door felt like walking on broken glass. When I turned the key and entered, the silence swallowed me whole. I automatically turned on the lights but quickly turned them off again. The darkness matched the emptiness I felt inside. "James?" I called out, in a foolish whisper as if he could answer. In the kitchen, the mug he had used that morning was still in the sink. The newspaper folded on the porch chair, exactly as he left it every day. His slippers under the table. I picked up the photo frame from the coffee table, the two of us at Revere Beach, young, smiling, with little Michael in our arms. I slid down to the living room floor, clutching the photo to my chest, and cried until I had no more tears. I cried like I had never cried before. Nobody came that night. No doorbell rang. My cell phone remained silent, except for generic stay-strong messages from people I barely knew. I slept on the couch, without the strength to go to the bedroom and face our empty bed. The next morning, reality weighed even heavier. There was a body to be waked, a funeral to organize, papers to sign. Still on autopilot, I called the funeral. Home in Dorchester. The woman on the other end of the line had a gentle voice, the kind trained to speak with people in shock. I responded like a robot to practical questions about caskets, flowers, schedules. I called Michael again. The call went to voicemail 3 times until he finally answered. "Hi, Mom." "Michael, your father." My voice failed. "The wake will be this afternoon. You'll come, right?" Silence on the other end. Then I heard voices in the background, laughter, soft music. "Mom, I have an important meeting at work today. I can't miss it. It's about that promotion I told you about." Something froze inside me. A new sensation. It wasn't just sadness. It was a deep, visceral disappointment. "Your father died, Michael," I said in a thread of a voice. "Your father died and you can't come to his wake?" "I'll try to stop by at the end, Mom. I've already said goodbye to Dad in my own way. You know how it is at the bank. I can't just miss work." I couldn't respond. I hung up the phone and stared at the wall for a time I couldn't measure. It was Nancy, our neighbor of more than 20 years, who found me like this, sitting at the kitchen table, staring into nothingness. She had a spare key, since James had that fall 3 years ago. She came in calling my name, worried because I wasn't answering the doorbell. "Ellen, my God in heaven, what happened?" she asked, gently shaking my shoulders. "James, Nancy, he's gone." She sat beside me and took my hands. Her eyes held that mixture of shock and compassion. She was the one who helped me choose the clothes James would wear, call relatives and friends, and prepare the house for after the burial. The wake was at Pine Hill Cemetery, close to home. James always said he wanted something simple when he passed, nothing ostentatious. No excessive crying and people pretending they knew me, he used to joke. But that afternoon, the room was full. Colleagues from his teaching days at Boston University, old neighbors, friends from the chess club he attended on Sundays, former students who found out through social media people who really knew him, who had stories to tell about how he had touched their lives. And Michael? He showed up in the last half hour, dressed in an impeccable suit, phone constantly in hand. He didn't cry. He didn't carry the casket. He greeted a few people, gave me a brief hug, and asked if I was okay, as if it were possible to be okay in that situation. "You don't need to stay if you're in a hurry," I said, unable to hide the bitterness in my voice. "I do need to get back to work, Mom. Lisa will stop by your place later to see how you're doing." Lisa never showed up. Not that night, not in the days that followed. For the first 30 days, I lived in a kind of bubble. Time passed in a confused sequence of empty mornings and sleepless nights. I took off my wedding ring, but put it back on the same day. I kept his side of the bed made, his toothbrush in place, his cologne untouched in the bathroom. Bills continued to arrive with his name, and each time I saw James Wilson printed somewhere, it was like a small stab wound. My salvation came from small kindnesses. Mrs. Thompson from number 43 would come up with a home-cooked meal almost every day. "I made more than I needed," she would say, but we both knew the truth. Mr. Harrison from the building next door would appear to borrow some sugar with suspicious frequency. Church friends organized a rotation to visit me. Michael, he sent sporadic messages. "Stay strong, Mom. Let me know if you need anything. We're praying for you." Always in the plural, always including Lisa, always distant, no visits, no hugs, no shoulder to cry on, as if his father's death had happened in another family, not his own. And you? What would you do if your child treated your pain with such indifference? If there was an abyss between the love you gave and the care you received in return? Anna, Sunday afternoon, exactly 1 month and 17 days after James's departure, the doorbell rang. My heart leaped. Perhaps Michael had finally come. I quickly fixed my hair, wiped any trace of tears from my face, and went to answer. It was him, but he wasn't alone. Lisa was by his side, impeccably dressed with a bouquet of white lilies in her hands. They were smiling, as if they were visiting a friend for a casual coffee, not a mother in mourning. "We brought flowers, Mom." Michael entered, giving me a quick kiss on the forehead. "How are you?" I wanted to tell the truth. I wanted to scream that I was shattered not just by James's death, but by my son's absence when I needed him most. I wanted to ask why he never came, why he never really called, why he never asked if I could sleep at night or if I was eating properly. But I swallowed all of this and simply replied, "Taking it one day at a time, son." We went to the kitchen. I prepared coffee while they sat down. My hands trembled a little as I served the cups. "Are you eating well?" asked Lisa, in a tone of concern so rehearsed it hurt. "Yes, the neighbors have been very kind," I replied, unable to look her in the eyes. That's when Michael cleared his throat, adjusted his posture, and said the words that would change everything between us. "Mom, I know it's still hard to talk about this, but did Dad leave any life insurance? Any retirement funds?" he asked, with that voice he used in work meetings. "Or maybe a will." The cup I was holding almost slipped from my fingers. I pretended not to have heard right because I wanted to believe that my son wasn't really asking about money while his father's body had barely cooled in the ground. "What's that, son?" "The documents, Mom. Dad was always organized with these things. He must have left everything prepared." He took a sip of coffee, as if we were discussing the weather forecast. "It's important we resolve the bureaucratic part soon." Lisa placed her hand over his in a gesture I couldn't decipher as either support or warning. Maybe both. She smiled at me, that smile that doesn't reach the eyes. "Mrs. Ellen, it's just to help, really. Michael is worried about you, you know? About your financial security. My hands began to tremble more visibly now, not from sadness or nervousness, but from anger I had never felt before, an anger that came from deep inside, rising like lava. I tried to control my breathing. "Don't lose your composure, Ellen," James would say. "I need to think about this carefully, son. I'm still organizing your father's things." "Of course, Mom, no rush." Michael smiled, but his eyes were already scanning the room as if assessing the value of each object. "But you know how it is. The sooner we resolve this, the better for everyone." Everyone meant him, and maybe Lisa, not me. The visit lasted less than an hour. Before leaving, Michael casually mentioned that he was thinking about buying a larger apartment, that the bank was offering interesting financing, but the down payment was high. The message was as clear as water. When the door closed behind them, I collapsed on the sofa. The house, which already seemed empty without James, now felt contaminated. The place that held our memories, where we raised our son, where James and I grew old together, was now just an asset to be liquidated. An estate, as lawyers would call it. That night I couldn't sleep. Michael's words echoed in my head. Life insurance, will, no rush. I remembered the countless times he had borrowed money from James in recent years. For a new car, for the down payment on the apartment, for a trip to Chicago with Lisa. Money that was never returned, because family doesn't charge family, as James would say, despite my reservations. The following morning, after a sleepless night, I made a decision. I went to the office. We maintained in the guest room where James kept all the important documents. He was always methodical with these things, unlike me. The desk drawer was locked, but I knew where he hid the key. Under the bronze statuette he received when he retired from the university. Inside the drawer, folders organized by category: paid bills, deeds, rental contracts for the apartment we had in Cambridge, and a blue folder, thicker than the others, with the words, "In case of my absence," written by hand in James's unmistakable handwriting. My hands trembled when I opened this folder. Inside were several documents, including instructions about bank accounts, passwords, investments. But what caught my attention was a sealed envelope with my name on it. Inside, 2 sheets. The first was the official will, signed, notarized. The second was a handwritten letter. "My dear Ellen, if you're reading this, it means I'm no longer there. I wish I could hold you right now, dry your tears, tell you everything will be all right, but I can only leave these words, hoping they bring some comfort. 47 years together. A lifetime. Our lifetime. We built so much, didn't we? Remember that tiny apartment in Somerville, where our bed barely fit? How we saved every penny to buy this house? The nights you stayed awake, worried about the bills, while I said everything would be fine. And it was. It always was, because we were together. I know you must feel lost now. I also know that our Michael, for whom we sacrificed so much, has probably already approached you asking about inheritance. He's been doing this with me for some time, asking for more and more, investing in dubious schemes, spending on things he doesn't need to impress people who don't matter. I tried to guide him, Ellen. You know I tried. But there's a limit to what we can do for our children once they become adults. The choice is theirs, and Michael's choice has been a past that worries me. That's why I made a decision. This will, which you hold in your hands, leaves everything to you. The house, the investments, the Cambridge apartment, everything, for your lifetime. So you never have to depend on anyone, much less on a son who seems to have forgotten the meaning of gratitude and respect. I know this may seem harsh, perhaps even unfair in the eyes of some, but I cannot, in good conscience, leave you vulnerable. I cannot allow the pressure for money to make you give up the security we built together. Use this document as your protection, as my last way of caring for you, even when I'm no longer physically there. With all the love in the world, James. I read the letter 3 times, tears blurring my vision. It was like hearing his voice again, advising, protecting. I had lost my companion, my friend, my safe harbor. But he, even knowing he would leave before me, had left one last act of love. The phone rang, pulling me from that moment. It was Michael. Mom, I just called to see if you've thought about what we discussed yesterday. I looked at the letter in my hands, at the official will beside it. I thought of all the times James told me I needed to be firmer with our son, that love is also saying no, that setting boundaries is sometimes the most genuine way to educate. I have, Michael, and I think we need to talk in person, with Mr. Roberts present. Mr. Roberts? Dad's lawyer? That's right. He was handling everything for your father. Can we meet tomorrow at 10 a.m. at his office in Beacon Hill? His hesitation was noticeable. Sure, Mom, but we don't need a lawyer for a family conversation, do we? We do, son. We really do. That night was different from the previous ones. There was still the pain of James's absence, the emptiness of the bed, the melancholy of the spaces he used to occupy. But there was also a certainty, a direction, as if he had left a map for me to follow, a path through the darkness. For the first time since the funeral, I went to the wardrobe and took one of his shirts, that navy blue one he wore on winter Sundays. It still had his smell. I put it on, over my nightgown, and sat on the porch, looking at the city lights stretching to the harbor. I remembered all the plans we made there on Boston's warm nights, trips we would take when he fully retired, a Mediterranean cruise, maybe a beach house in Cape Cod. And you? Have you ever had to make a difficult decision regarding someone you love, even knowing it could forever change your relationship? This tea. Next morning, I woke up with a determination I hadn't felt in weeks. I took a long shower, chose my clothes carefully, applied lipstick. To dispel the sick look, as my mother would say. I called Mr. Roberts before leaving to confirm he would be available. He had been James's friend for decades, besides being his lawyer. He knew our story, our struggles, our son. His office was in an old building on Beacon Street, one of those with a small elevator and a doorman who knows everyone, by name. When I arrived, Michael was already there, sitting in the waiting room, fiddling with his phone, with that impatient expression he developed after he started working at the bank. Good morning, son. He looked up surprised. Perhaps he expected to see the same fragile and disoriented woman of recent months. But I had dressed as I did in the days when I taught literature at Franklin High School. Hair up, straight posture, firm gaze. Mom, you look different. I am as I've always been, Michael. I just couldn't remember that. Mr. Roberts called us in. His office was simple but elegant, with shelves of law books and a view of the harbor in the background. He hugged me for a long time before indicating the chairs for us to sit. Ellen, it's good to see you. James would be proud. Michael looked from one to the other, visibly uncomfortable with that familiarity. He probably imagined that Mr. Roberts was just a service provider, not someone who had dinner at our house dozens of times, who saw our son grow up, who was James's and my best man at our wedding. So shall we get to the point? Said Michael, adjusting himself in the chair as if he were in a business meeting. Mr. Roberts looked at me, as if asking permission to proceed. I nodded slightly. Well, Michael, your mother asked me to explain the situation regarding the assets left by your father, he began. opening a folder on the table. As you probably know, your parents built considerable wealth over the years. The house in Magnolia Heights, the apartment in Cambridge, the investments. Yes, I know all that, Michael interrupted, impatient. The question is, how we're going to divide it. Legally, half is my mother's, and the other half should be divided among the heirs, right? Mr. Roberts cleared his throat, uncomfortable. Actually, no. Your father left a will. Very specific. He took the document from the S folder and placed it on the table. Michael leaned forward, frowning. A will, but what will? This one, I replied, indicating the paper. Your father made it about 2 years ago. Everything is legal, registered with a notary. Michael took the document, his eyes running over the lines. I saw his face gradually change, from curiosity to disbelief, and then to indignation. He looked at me, then at Mr. Roberts, and back to the paper. This can't be legal. I leave all my property, movable and immovable, rights and shares, to my wife, Ellen Marie Taylor Wilson, for her to dispose of according to her will, and need for as long as she lives. He read aloud, incredulous. And me? I'm the only child. I'm entitled to my legitimate share. Mr. Roberts adjusted his glasses, patient. Your father was within the law, Michael. He left Ellen the lifetime, usufruct of all assets. This means that while she lives, all assets remain under her exclusive administration. After her passing, then yes, it passes to you. How long could that take? The words left Michael's mouth before he could contain them. That question pierced my heart like a poisoned arrow. My son was essentially asking how long I would still live, so he could finally have access to the inheritance. At that moment, the last thread of illusion I maintained about him broke. As long as God wills, Michael, I replied, with a calmness I didn't know I possessed. I might still live 10, 20 years, or more. He ran his hand through his hair, visibly frustrated. Mom, it's not that. He hesitated, searching for words. I'm about to put a down payment on a larger apartment. Lisa and I are thinking about having children. I thought Dad would have considered that. He did, son, I replied, feeling a lump in my throat. He thought of everything, including the last 5 loans you asked from him and never repaid. The failed investments you convinced him to make. The time you almost convinced him to mortgage the house to be your guarantor in that import business. Michael turned pale. He clearly didn't expect me to know these details. James rarely told me these things to avoid worrying me, but in recent months, perhaps sensing the end, he had opened up to me about his concerns about our son. They were just businesses that didn't work out, Mom. It happens. His tone was now defensive, almost hostile. I didn't know Dad held such a grudge. It wasn't a grudge, Michael. It was concern. For you, for your choices, and for me, so I wouldn't be left helpless afterward. Mr. Roberts cleared his throat, trying to ease the tension. If I may, there's another matter. James established a fund for you, Michael. It's not a huge amount, but enough to help with the down payment for that apartment you mentioned, if it's really a necessity. Michael's eyes briefly brightened, but soon his face hardened again. A fund? Like charity? He threw the will on the table with disdain. This is absurd. I'll contest it legally. I have a right to my share. You can try, Mr. Roberts replied calmly. But I can assure you that your father consulted the best specialists in succession law. The will is bulletproof. Besides, a process like this could take years, cost a fortune in legal fees, and the emotional toll. I don't care, Michael was almost shouting now. It's not fair. This house, where I grew up, where I lived my childhood, all of this should be mine too. Those words hit me like a slap. The house where he grew up, The house that James and I bought working 2 shifts, saving every penny. The house where I spent sleepless nights when he had a fever. Where we celebrated every birthday, every achievement. The house he barely visited in recent years, except when he needed something. Michael. My voice came out almost in a whisper. The house you want to sell is the same one where your father and I built our entire life. The same one you barely had time to come to when your father died. The same one where I've been living alone in my grief while you go on with your life, as if nothing had happened. He stood up, his face flushed with anger. So that's it? Revenge? Because I didn't get to the wake on time? Because I have my own life? No, son. It's not revenge. It's protection. Yours included. I took James's letter from my purse, carefully folded. Your father left this for me, but I think you should read it. I handed him the letter. Michael took it hesitantly. His eyes ran over the lines, his expression subtly changing with each paragraph. I saw the exact moment when James's words hit him. His shoulders dropped, his breathing became heavier. By the time he reached the end, there were tears in the corners of his eyes. Dad wrote this? He asked, his voice breaking. Yes, shortly before he passed. I didn't know he thought of me this way. He loved you, Michael, very much, but he was worried about your choices and about what would happen to me afterward. Michael slowly folded the letter, returning it to me. He remained silent for a few seconds, as if processing everything. He began but stopped. He cleared his throat. I need to go. And without saying anything else, he left the room, leaving Mr. Roberts and me in the heavy silence that followed his departure. Through the window, I saw him hurriedly cross the street, talking on his phone, probably with Lisa, sharing his indignation, his disappointment. Are you all right, Ellen? Mr. Roberts asked, genuinely concerned. I don't know, Robert. I really don't know. I left the office feeling an enormous weight. It wasn't relief, as I imagined it would be after finally confronting Michael. It was a new kind of pain. The pain of seeing confirmed what I feared. My son, my only son, saw in me merely an obstacle between him and the money he believed he deserved. I walked slowly along the avenue, observing the people around me. Couples holding hands, parents, with children in their arms, elderly people on park benches, all weaving their own stories, their own joys and disappointments. How many of them had lost someone they loved? How many had discovered painful truths about people they loved? In the days that followed, the silence was absolute. No calls, no messages from Michael. It was as if that meeting had dug an abyss between us, even deeper than James's death. I oscillated between sadness and anger, between guilt and the certainty that I was doing the right thing. At night I talked to James in the darkness of the bedroom as if he could hear me, advise me. Did I do the right thing, my love? Or did I just make everything worse? A week after the meeting, I received an email from Michael, formal, distant. Dear Mom, after reflecting on our conversation, I decided to accept Dad's wishes. I will not contest the will. I understand your concerns and respect your decision. I'll need some time to process all of this. I hope you understand. With love, Michael. No phone call, no visit, just those cold lines, probably revised by Lisa, maybe even by some lawyer. The following months were the loneliest of my life. Nancy still occasionally came up with a home-cooked meal. The church reading group still invited me to Wednesday meetings, but nothing filled the void left not only by James, but now also by Michael. On the 3-month anniversary of James's passing, I decided to go to the cemetery. I brought daisies, his favorite flowers. As I arranged the bouquet on the grave, I spoke to him as I always did. I told him about the weather, about the neighbors, about the book I was reading, and finally about Michael. He's hurt, James. I think more with you than with me, for not trusting him, for protecting me from him. Tears were flowing freely now. Sometimes I wonder if we did right in sparing him so much. If we shouldn't have been tougher, taught him more about the value of work, of gratitude. A gentle breeze rustled the leaves of the trees around, as if James were answering me in his own way. When I got home, I was surprised to find Lisa sitting on the front steps. She was alone, wearing jeans and a simple sweater, very different from the impeccable image she usually presented. "Mrs. Wilson," she said, standing up as I approached, "I hope you don't mind that I came." I invited her in, more out of politeness than desire for company. We sat in the garden, the late afternoon sun filtering through the maple leaves. "Michael doesn't know I'm here," she began, nervously twisting the strap of her purse. We're not together anymore." This surprised me. They had seemed so united in their campaign to secure the inheritance. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, not entirely sure if I meant it. "Don't be. It was for the best." She looked around the garden at the rose bushes James had planted years ago. "I read the letter, Michael's father's letter. He showed it to me before things fell apart between us." I waited, silent, for her to continue. "He was right, you know, about Michael, about who he's become." She looked directly at me now, her eyes full of a sadness I hadn't noticed before. I tried to tell him that his priorities were all wrong, that you don't measure a person's worth by their bank account or the car they drive. But he was so fixated on the idea that he deserved that money, as if it were a prize for simply existing. "Why are you telling me this, Lisa?" "Because I wanted you to know that you did the right thing, and because," she hesitated, "because I saw how much it hurt you. His indifference, his absence when you needed him most." I felt tears welling in my eyes again. Has he said anything? About me? About the will? Nothing for now. She stood up too. "I just wanted you to know that he's not a monster. He's just a man who lost his way, who spent so much time chasing things of no value that he forgot what really matters." She picked up her purse, preparing to leave. "He'll need time, and when he's ready, perhaps you can find in your heart some space to forgive him." I walked her to the door in silence. Before leaving, she turned. "Your husband was a wise man, Mrs. Wilson. He knew that sometimes the greatest act of love is setting boundaries." She smiled sadly. "I hope one day Michael understands that." After Lisa left, I returned to the garden. I sat on the wooden bench, in that place where James and I spent so many afternoons. I closed my eyes and could almost feel his presence beside me, his arm around my shoulders, his familiar smell. "And you? What would you do if you were in my place? Would you forgive a son who only realized your value when he could no longer exploit your love?" The days went by, turning into weeks. I continued. My routine: the reading group on Wednesdays, Mass on Sundays, visits to the cemetery. A new life, different, but one that gradually gained some meaning. One Sunday afternoon, about 2 weeks after Lisa's visit, the doorbell rang. It was Michael. Alone, with no gift in his hands, without the confident smile he usually wore. Just my son with deep dark circles and a look I hadn't seen since he was a child and broke something important. "Hi, Mom." His voice came out low, almost a whisper. "May I come in?" I opened the door and stepped aside. He entered hesitantly, like a stranger, not like someone who grew up in that house. "Would you like some coffee?" I offered. "No, thank you." He stood in the middle of the living room, not knowing what to do with his hands. "I just wanted to see you, to know how you're doing." I indicated the sofa and we sat down, a heavy silence between us. Finally he spoke. Mom, I'm sorry for everything. His voice broke. For the wake, for not being there when you needed me, for asking about inheritance when the pain was still so fresh, for being so selfish. I said nothing. I let him. Continue. I read Dad's letter many times, every word. He swallowed hard. He was right about me, about who I've become. Only now do I realize how much I disappointed you both. I saw the tears in his eyes, the first genuine emotion he had shown in years. The money doesn't matter, Mom. The house, the investments, none of it. He looked around at the room where he grew up. What matters is that I lost Dad without ever telling him how much I admired him. And I almost lost you too out of greed for not knowing what's really worthwhile in life. I extended my hand and touched his lightly. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet. It was acknowledgement, a small gesture to say, I'm listening. I don't expect you to forgive me now, he continued. I just wanted you to know that I'm trying to change. Really. He took out of his pocket a folded paper. James's letter, visibly worn from being read so much. Dad was always the wisest man I knew. Too bad I had to lose him to see that. At that moment I saw my son again. Not the ambitious man he had become, but the boy that James and I raised, who ran through the garden, who asked for stories before bedtime. Maybe one day I'll forgive you, Michael, I finally said. But not now. Grief isn't just absence. It's revelation. It's in the darkest moments that we see who is willing to light a candle and who just wants to know if the gold still shines. He nodded, accepting my words. I understand, and I'll wait as long as necessary. When he stood up to leave, I asked, And Lisa, I heard you two broke up. He smiled sadly. Yes. She tried to show me what I didn't want to see, and I didn't. React well. One more person I hurt. I walked him to the door. Before leaving, he turned. Mom, when I come back, I don't need to bring flowers. I know that's not what you need. No, son, you don't need flowers, just truth. I watched him walk to the car, a solitary figure on the sidewalk that James swept every Sunday morning. I don't know if I would be able to forgive him completely. Someday. Maybe yes, with time. What I did know was that grief had transformed me in unexpected ways. It had shown me not only who I had lost, but also who I was, stronger than I imagined. I went back inside, closed the door. The house still held the silence of James's absence. But now there was something new in the air. It wasn't happiness, not yet. It was perhaps a small seed of peace. The certainty that even in the deepest losses, something remains. And sometimes, it's precisely in the ruins that we discover who we really are. James left me a home, yes. But he also left me lessons. The greatest one, those who love, care. Those who don't care don't deserve. And I, who had always taken care of everyone, now learned to take care of myself too. Some call this selfishness. I call it survival. Thanks you for reaching the end of this story. If it touched you in some way, like and share it with someone who needs to hear this.